Thank you. And welcome everyone to our first third Thursday of the year, the Writer's Toolbox, preparing for the year ahead. Before we dive into the conversation, I'm going to introduce our panelists for tonight. So first up, Matt Bell is the author most recently of the novels Appleseed, Scrapper, and In the House Upon the Dirt Between the Lake and the Woods. His stories have appeared in Best American Mystery Stories, Esquire, Tin House Conjunctions, Fairy Tale Review, Gulf Coast, and many other publications. A native of Michigan, he now teaches creative writing at Arizona State University. Thanks so much, Matt, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Next up, Bev Chukwu is a Nigerian-American writer, filmmaker, script consultant, and behavior therapist from Garland, Texas. She is an MFA alum of the James A. Michener Center for Writers at the University of Texas at Austin, where she received a fellowship in screenwriting and fiction. Her screenplay, Prince of Lavendale Street, was the feature winner in the Blue Cat Screenplay Competition, and an excerpt of her novel in progress, Of Broken Things, was published in Volume 2 of the Ice Cream Social Anthology. Bev is a queer writer who tells stories about assimilation, the allure of groupthink, and characters who struggle with being someone they are not. Mental health advocacy for people of the Black diaspora is at the forefront of her work. Thanks so much for being here, Bev.
Yeah. Ooh.
And finally, Katie Gutierrez is the author of the debut novel, More Than You'll Ever Know. She has an MFA from Texas State University, and her writing has appeared in Time, Harper's Bazaar, Texas Highways, and more. She lives in San Antonio, Texas, with her husband and their 2 kids. Thanks so much for being here, Katie.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, Jenny.
So thanks everyone for being here, and let's get started with this discussion. So although we are 3 weeks into 2023 already, I think we're all coming into this space really thinking about where we are standing in this moment of time, and we're looking ahead to where we want to go from here. And so I want to start this panel by asking each of our panelists to tell us a little bit about where you are in this moment in time and how you're thinking about this new year of writing, whether that looks like goal setting, resolutions, or just committing to a new project or an old one. Tell us where you're at. So Matt, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Sam, and thanks to everybody who's here tonight. I usually set sort of goals and resolutions. I have them off my screen right now. My thing says goals, resolutions, and evolutions. I don't know what that means. We'll see what happens. I think I'm in the middle of a book I've been writing for a couple of years. I'm hoping to finish that this year. That's probably like the sort of top goal. Then I have some goals I think that just renew every year. Like I always try to read 100 books every year at least, right? So every year I check that off or don't, and I put it back on the list. I'll say, I think my broad sort of goal setting philosophy is that goals orient me. Like, I set a goal, like I'm going to finish my book by August 1st, and then my life organizes around that. But when I miss it, I just go, okay, and I just move it down the road, right? Like I try to be like really, they do push me, but they also feel kind of soft if I'm not going to get them. And that seems okay too. So I'm always sort of navigating that, like how can I pressure myself / be kind to myself with those kind of goal setting.
Thank you. And I love the idea of using goals to kind of orient yourself, and we're definitely going to get into that later.
Cool.
So Bev, what about you?
Oh, where do I even start? Matt, I messaged you on Twitter, or I didn't message you on Twitter. I commented on your Twitter post. I am going to get your book. So the first thing I did was, especially for a screenwriter, I mean, screenwriting goals are so difficult because I think that, thinking of it as a resolution is very like terrifying. I actually don't like thinking of them as resolutions. I think of them as intentions and things that are within my control, right? Like, the fact that, so many goals that we set for the new year are like, I'm gonna win a Emmy. I'm like, you have no control over any of that. And so for me, I'm thinking a lot about things that are in my control. So I have 2 pilots that I'm working on. I don't want to shout her out too much because she's in the audience for this, but I actually met an amazing memoir writer. Her book comes out this year. I don't know if I'm allowed to pub it, but her book comes out this year. We both happen to be like Black writers from Garland, Texas. We met at the Writers League of Texas Agents and Editors Conference this last year. And so we're doing a lot of talking on adapting her memoir into a screenplay. And outside of that, it's just like my own writing goals. I might have some work with YouTube originals that, there's that. I might be in LA for March. I might be doing this. So the thing for me is like, because screenwriting is so up in the air, I'm thinking about tangible goals that I can control. I can work on 2 pilots and a feature in a year. Like that's attainable. And if I do more, that's fantastic. But I think just staying in control of that, and then also learning, same as Matt, like I keep track of every book that I read in the year, which is why I love working with the Writers League of Texas, because I discover books that haven't even thought about. So reading a lot of scripts, reading a lot of books and reading a lot of scripts, because I also write fiction. And I'm working on a short story collection. So that's something I like fit in on Mondays. Monday is my fiction day. I don't have as much time to do fiction, but that's it. I can commit to that. Another thing that's within my control. So attainable goals that are within my control. And yeah, if I do more, then I feel good.
Absolutely. Gosh, I love that. It can be really scary to set goals. And I think intention is just a great word to use for minimizing some of that fear. Katie, what about you?
Yeah, so last year my debut came out, and I had a lot of good intentions when it came to starting work on my next novel. And between sort of the promotion for the debut and the nonfiction writing that I do, it really didn't even start to happen until the end of the year. And I was really being pretty hard on myself for that. My deadline was, I guess, in a couple of days from now. And thankfully, I'm not being held to it. We had this discussion months ago, but in my head, it still feels like this deadline that I myself chose, and I'm blowing way past because I'm nowhere near where I wanted to be. And so part of, I think, goal setting for me is like learning that publishing a book comes with all of these other commitments that I had no idea how to even anticipate. And so remembering that there was a lot that was done last year that, I never even thought that I would be doing. And so I think when it comes to this year, my big goal and my big, commitment is to work on this next project, which I'm really excited about. And it's also for me, and I know we'll talk more about this, but I have 2 small kids and my work windows have been pretty chaotic and very small. And so I think what Bev was saying about choosing goals that are attainable, that you can actually achieve is really important for me, because I tend to say yes to everything. I always want to do everything. And so one of my big intentions for this year is really to prioritize the book above all else, and anything else that I say yes to or commit to, whether it's nonfiction writing or anything else, it has to sort of I have to give myself time. That's my rule. Like I have to give myself time before I say yes to it, and figure out if it's something I really genuinely want to do, and also if it's something that I actually have time to do and won't take away from the larger project. So those are the things that I have in mind going into the year.
Awesome. Thank you. These are all such great points. And I really want to ask this next question, because it's just diving into like goal setting and resolutions and all of these things that you're already kind of circling. And so we mentioned earlier that our first class of the year is all about mapping out your writing goals for 2023. And it's really meant to help writers not only map them out, but also set up achievable milestones along the way to really help them keep going. And so I wanted to ask you how you approach goal setting, because once you have this goal, it's like, okay, this is great. How am I going to get there though? So what steps do you then take to hold yourself accountable? And Bev, I will come back to you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, I mean, it honestly depends on the project. So for me, with a script, right, because I work in both TV and in features, a lot of it is just like picking the idea that lingers the most, right? So sometimes when I'm like thinking about things, I definitely like jot it down. I do this, but then if you're like me and you're kind of like an idea machine, it's like overwhelming, right? You have so many ideas. You're like, which one should I pick? They all seem interesting, but in reality, your mind already knows which one you want to write. And so that's the experience that I've had in terms of goal setting in the past few years, is like I choose the one or two new ideas, right? That feels like they're lingering, because there's always something from the past. I'm always rewriting. That's my like the plague of screenwriting is like, I'm always rewriting. So if I have a new idea, it has to be compelling enough for me to feel the pull to it. And for me, I mean, I said this in my class that I'm teaching again this year, but I talk about how I am pulled to the ideas that scare me, right? So it's like where there's fear, there's also like an entry point into like analysis and catharsis. And so I choose that idea. And then from there, I have a whole step of things. I don't know if you want me to keep talking about it, but I mean, then it becomes like, hey, can I summarize this idea into one line? And screenwriters talk about log lines constantly, and it's so helpful. I think that it's something, I talked about this in the Writers League of Texas conference, like one line, talking about your book in one line is so hard, but you can do it if it's a concise idea. 1 or 2 lines, right? I'll give 2 lines for our genre people who are like, I need to set the world 1800 years ago, dinosaurs, I don't know.
Right.
But I do think that it's like, if you can summarize your book or your play or your screenplay into 1 or 2 lines, then you have something worth digging into. And then once I do that, I go from character. And the thing is, though, these are week by week things. It's like, if I've worked on a project once or twice a week, I've done my job, and I've showed up for my writing. But if I'm not working on it at all, I'm probably not as ready to commit to it. So that's kind of where I start. And then from there, I start building out. So I have the general idea, and then I get more specific and more specific and more specific. And then somehow I have like an outline. And I do the same thing with the book that I hope to return to at some point with my book. It's the same thing. I go broad, and then I get deeper and I get deeper and I get deeper. And it's up to you if you want to share, right, with people. I have a community of people that I share work with, and that's accountability. There's so many things. They don't even have to read your work, right? But I will sometimes send my sister pages every Monday for my collection, and I tell her, you don't have to read it. Do not read it, actually. Don't read it. This is just so that I can send it to someone and feel like I am turning in like a paper or something. So that's how I approach the goals. And again, it's like focusing on 1 or 2. More than that is kind of a bit much.
I mean, that's a great reminder, because it can be overwhelming when you have all of these ideas and all these things you want to accomplish, and you're like, can I do them all? But there are those that really linger. Matt, I'd love to hear about how you hold yourself accountable. And I'd also just like to tack on, I've read a lot about your daily goals and how you use that every day. So I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I do have all these like accountability systems, I think, some of which are like just making lists. Like, I've kept a list of all the books I read every year since like 2006. It's like up on my website, right? Like I've like had that forever. Like, it's practically my biography, I think, but like writing them down makes you want to read more. Katie was talking about saying no to people. A couple of years ago, one of my resolutions was to say no more, and I kept a list of every time I said no to something. That was great, right? That was like a super good list. Day to day, I keep these writing logs in like a Google sheet for the novel I'm writing at the time. I just write down every day how many hours I wrote, how many words I wrote, which is often in the negative because that's writing novels, like it's sort of a weird thing. It tallies them up. And then I write a little note every day that's just like, what happened today? Like, how did things go? What was I thinking about? And I do that partly because when I first built the spreadsheet, I made it turn red if I put 0 in. I'm a little nicer to myself now, so it doesn't do that anymore. But I think I don't like putting in the zeros. I like to work. I like to fill it out. So I think like that helps. And one of the things it really does is like when you're writing a book, it takes so long that you often feel like you're making no progress, even if you're working all the time. And like at the end of a month or on a time when I feel like that, I can look at that spreadsheet and read that log and be like, well, look how hard I worked this month. Look how much I did do. Look how much progress I did make. And so I think like those kind of things are really useful to me. But, like I track the miles I run. I track the new recipes I cook every year. I track the movies I watch. Like, I think there is something about just paying attention to like yourself and to what you're using. I mean, like all those lists are what I spent my time on. That's like what I did. And I think like that's really important to me to sort of like, to be sure that I'm paying attention to the part of my life that I want to grow and actually spend time on.
Thank you. Katie, what about you?
I've tried different accountability systems over the years, and I feel like I can really divide it, before kids, after kids. And before kids, I would use like a daily word count goal. And I remember it was 2,000 words a day, which to me now, I'm like, how? possible ever. And I slowly started, reducing that. And so when I had kids, it became about when would my focused work time be? And then that really became my kids' nap times. And so and of course, those nap times are also often in flux. And so, we lose one and we lose two, and now we're down to only one for one kid. And so I think to me right now, accountability comes down to finding that space in a day. Right now it's cracks in a day. There's small cracks in a day. But finding them and actually being able to touch the work somehow, even if it's literally just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't touch on the accountability part though. So for the accountability, I have friends. I have a small, writers group on WhatsApp that, we all talk about our work and we share our successes and our failures and our frustrations, and we brainstorm with each other, and we're all huge fans of each other's work, and we'll send each other, pages. And so as an example, toward the end of last year, I'd hit about 10,000 words with the new draft. And I was feeling really frustrated because I was hitting a wall, and I was sitting down in the cracks of the day, and I was meeting the word count that I set for myself, which was 500 words every time I sat down, right? So not every day, but every time I had a chance to sit down. And I just felt like I was meeting the word count, and moving forward and liking some of it, but just feeling like I was just writing words just to meet the word count. Something wasn't working. And so, that was kind of when I talked to my friends in the group chat and another friend, and kind of asked them, like, it's a big ask, it's 50 pages, but I just felt like I didn't know what was going wrong and I needed some perspective. And so I asked them if I could send them those pages. And they were gracious enough to say yes, and read them, within a few days. And so we had some really honest conversations about it that were, really invigorating to me, and gave me a lot of, fresh perspective on the work, which then made me motivated to go back to it. And so one of the things that I think I want to try, going into this new year, a friend of mine, she's been doing, she's calling them writing sprints with a friend of hers. And so they'll log on at the same time, or they'll text each other and they'll say, okay, we're going to sit down 2 hours, go. And so she messaged me the other day and she said, hey, she and I are going to sit down for 2 hours if you want to join. And I couldn't join until an hour in, but just knowing that they were sitting down and they were going to do it for that particular space of time, it was enough to make me say to my husband, I need an hour. I just want to sit down and do this. Like, can I have that time? And so, we're constantly juggling the kids back and forth. And so I was able to get a lot of work done that day. And so I think there's really something to me about the energy of knowing you're working when other people are working too. And you're kind of sharing this creative space, even from a distance, and you can talk to each other afterwards. How many words did you get? Where are you in the project? How did you feel about the words today? And that to me is really, really inspiring. And so I think that I am going to try to do that as much as I can this year with anybody who wants to participate.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I've been doing some of that too. It's really helpful, right? Just that knowing someone else's writing is somehow like incredibly helpful. Yeah.
Well, kind of like
I used to like working
at the
at
coffee shop writing days.
Yeah, I just
Right. Yeah.
So I was just thinking about, I used to love working at coffee shops. I don't know what kind of I don't know. The ambivert in me has been leaning more introvert. And I think that's kind of gone in the way of me going to the coffee shops and doing the active writing with other people that I used to do. But it's so helpful. And I did the writing sprints too. I would do them in the morning with my friends. And the writers group, there's so many ways, but it's just so hard to find which one fits with your lifestyle or what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like, you throw it out there and you see if those times align, if you can make it work, and maybe it's 30 minutes. But for me, it's about, okay, somebody knows that I'm wanting to sit down and work, and that is motivating to me. And then as soon as I can sit down and work, I'm in it. I'm going to stay working as long as I possibly can. For me, it's a matter of making and carving out that space to actually sit down and get those, that first moment on the page, and then from there I can go.
I mean, Katie, you're actually speaking. Oh, Bev,
No, I was gonna make a joke. I was like, do we all just have crippling performance anxiety? You know what I mean? Where it's again, the accountability and getting up in the morning and making sure that somebody else knows you're writing. That's anxiety that's giving you the energy, right? Because there's an expectation there. And Here, power to it. You know, if you can
Right.
utilize
Right? We just want
for your
credit,
own-
right? Give me credit.
Yeah.
I did it. Like, no, I did
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
especially like with novels, with screenplays, they're such long projects, you know, where you
Yes.
don't have the set, like, you know, when I write like short nonfiction, it is incredibly satisfying to
Right.
finish a project
Right.
in a week or two, and it's done
Yeah.
and it's there and it's out. Like a novel and screenplay, like it is such a sustained commitment, you know, that like you need that credit, you need that list,
Yes,
and
you
that
do.
person to say good job.
Someone needs to know I showed up. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I did it.
Definitely. Oh my gosh, I love that. And it really speaks to like the power of a writing community in your life as well. But yeah, so I think ultimately, I love what you just said earlier, Katie, about touching the work every day, because we can set these goals, but if we are not carving out the time to engage with our writing and to sit down at our writing desk, we're not really going to move forward. And so I'd love to ask y'all to talk about how you really try your best to carve out time in your daily lives when responsibilities get in the way, you've got family, and just life can be really hard and draining a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so, Katie, I'll come back to you because you have this wonderful essay called Writing During Nap Time, A Parent's Practice. And I'd love to hear more about how you've been carving out that space and if it's evolved at all, or if you're looking to evolve that at all in 2023.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's gone downhill since that essay, to be honest. You know, that so I wrote that essay, I think around the time my oldest daughter turned 1, and that was around the time that I finished the first draft of More Than You'll Ever Know. And there was a period of time after she was born where I was in crisis because I hadn't written since I was 6 months pregnant. And, you know, I couldn't figure out how to make it work with the fact that she wasn't sleeping at night. She wasn't napping. You know, she was really colicky for a period of months. It was just, and more than the fact that there was no time availability, there was no mental space for it either, because, you know, that early parenthood stage is so, you are so committed to this other person's survival, you know, and it's all encompassing. And yet also incredibly mundane, right? So it's this weird juxtaposition of this is the most intense thing you've ever done in your life, but also you're so bored so much of the time, and you have no space or time, right? So how do you get that that creative practice? And so when my daughter started napping, and that was when that nap time practice sort of started for me, and when kind of honestly also the start of like a writing community, because it was really on Twitter where I started becoming aware of other writers who were moms in particular talking about the fact that they had written their books during nap time. And to me, you know, at the time when I was drafting this book, I was like blown away. I actually didn't know that could be done until I heard other mothers who were writers talking about it. And so, you know, I kind of reached out to them for this essay and, you know, became friends with, you know, a couple of them. And so it's, yeah, I was really committed to that nap time practice and sort of it evolving as I became pregnant with my second child, and then really trying to kind of make it work anytime they were unconscious or, you know, were with my husband. Now, you know, with the pandemic added such another level to it because, you know, we were all home all the time. They were not in school. We didn't have childcare. It was, yeah, you know, looking back, I almost don't know how I got the book done, but I can say that I wrote and edited the majority of this novel during those spaces of time when they were sleeping or my husband had the kids. And so now that's shifting a bit because, you know, they're older. My daughter's 4, my son's 2. And so they're in, you know, preschool / daycare. Some of the time we're just starting out with them going, you know, 4 to 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. And so I feel like I'm really excited about having that space for the first time in, you know, 4 or 5 years. And so that, you know, the morning time when they're at school, if they're not sick, because they are sick a lot and they are home a lot, yeah, that'll be my work time. And so I'm really committed during that space of time to getting the work done then. And I also, you know, like I think lowering my expectation of like the word count, right? So I mentioned the 2,000 words that I used to do before. I reached a point where it was a lot of output, a lot of pages I was getting done. the first draft of this novel was 600 pages and most of them were not very good,
Right.
And so now I feel like if I can write 250 words that I really like in a day, if you do that math, it doesn't seem like much, but in a year you've got 91,000 words.
Yeah.
And so, that is kind of like, to me, if I can set the bar at that level of like, I don't need to have this massive word output. I just need to have a couple of paragraphs that I really love in a day. I know most of the time, if I can get that, I will get more. But if I can start there, then I know that I'll be moving forward. I might be inching forward, but I'll be moving forward. And so the ultimate goal is to have the first draft of this book done, by the end of the year. And so now you all know, hold me accountable.
Right.
But so that's my writing practice. I think it's constantly in flux. It's been incredibly chaotic. But I do just want to encourage anybody who is in a similar situation that, that it can be done. And I think that is something I wish I knew earlier. I thought it had to look very different than writing looks for me most days. Yeah.
Thank you. Matt, how do you carve out your time?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the time, and sort of my ideal is I try to write in the mornings. That's when I'm sort of best, I think. And I think really it's like I'm just a better writer before I've had to be in the world and have to, answer email or teach classes or do other things, which is just hard for me to come back from the people world into my imagination sometimes. I can revise after that, but not usually draft. So I've been lucky. I'm a professor. I don't have kids. I've sort of, my time's kind of my own in that way. And so most days I write from after breakfast for a couple hours, ideally like Monday through Friday. When I was younger, I used to work like 7 days a week. And at some point I was like, maybe I'll be a person and like do things on the weekend with other people. And I don't think it really made me any less sort of productive or less, I was getting the same amount done in a different way. I like Katie, I think my real goal is to like touch the work every day, because there are days where you can't do anything or something comes up or there's other things you have to deal with. But if I open the document and I change a sentence or I write a little bit, even if I make a note in my phone about something, I have this insane like novel length phone note about my novel. If I write in that, it also kind of counts. And I think that like touching it every day keeps my brain working on the book, which is the real sort of pleasure. To like live in the book through time is really important to me. I think I'm generally trying to get away from like thinking about writing in like productivity terms. Like I don't want to be a factory, like I want to be a person. And so I think trying, even though I'm keeping track of my hours and my words, I'm not like fixated on them. And I think that seems really important to me. I think if there's anything else, just daily routine stuff that really helps. For me, like routine in general makes me like a happier person. Like I think I'm good when I'm in routine. I sort of like get up, exercise, have breakfast, read, meditate, write. Like if I could do that every day before noon, I'm like a pretty happy person. And so I think the real reason to write every day for me is no longer to get my words, but I just feel more like myself on days I write than on days I don't. And same with reading. I think on days I don't read or write, I feel really like thin. I assume other people are just interesting, right? But for me to be interesting requires like this like constant like refueling of like art and things, So yeah, people who are already interesting probably don't have to do this. It requires hours of upkeep for me to be me. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Bev. I saw you nodding.
Oh yeah, it's just like that's. I don't know. I have a stack of books by my bed. Right. It's one of those things like before bed, it's part of my practice as well. I do think that that's like, I wasn't even going to say this, but now that you mention it, I'm like, that actually is part of my, that's part of my routine, like consuming the material, the type of material that I make,
Right.
I know people get tired, right, of sometimes reading things that are in their own discipline. Like I hear all the time when I was in Michener, the fiction writers there, because I did fiction and screenwriting at the Michener Center. The fiction writers would be like, I can't stand fiction. I hate it. I'm just gonna read poetry. And I'm like, no, you don't. You're tired. You need to read something that maybe isn't exactly like a dramedy about a mom who does this and does that. And I'm like, you're reading things that are way too similar. Like there's still room for enjoyment. And so for me, the biggest writing practice is exactly what Matt said about being a person. That's like, I cannot tell you guys how many times like being a person has just fueled my writing. It's like, oh, I didn't like do anything from Friday night until Sunday evening. So that's my, just to get into my schedule, because I'm a therapist, I actually have 3 jobs. It's too much. So I'm a therapist, I write coverage, I have to read a ton of scripts. I teach sometimes. And so for me, it's like, I don't know why I've done this to myself. That's the question I'm asking myself every day. Why am I doing this? But I know why, right? Like everything that is a part of my life right now has all like, it's all contributing to a certain level of fulfillment. And that's something that I remind myself every single day. And so when I wake up at 7, you know, every morning, 7 or 6, it depends, usually 7, 6 is too early for me, but 7, I get up at 7 every single morning before work and I do a little bit, whether it's like my writing, reading my writing and then reading somebody else's writing or starting coverage or preparing for class. Like my time is the mornings. I'm like a morning person, mainly because by the time I get home, I've spent all day working with kids and being on, and I also work with some adults, and they're all neurodivergent. And I think that like, I think we're all neurodivergent. I think neurodiversity is like a scale that doesn't end. But like, it's a lot of work. Like all of my time during the day is spent like focused on the growth and the ableness, right? The ableness to communicate your needs functionally, right? Like that's all that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how do I like teach other people this skill? How do I like learn more about them? How do I focus on their personal growth? And then by the time I come home, I'm exhausted. And so usually I don't have the mental capacity or the energy to do a lot, but then I have to do it anyways. And if I have to work after work, I usually just carve out an hour and I don't do any more. And then when it comes to the weekends, because I mean, I have a partner, I have like a life, I schedule things, like I have one thing socially, right? Like if I have one thing socially on my calendar, that's good. But honestly, you have to be savage with your time. You know what I mean? Over the weekend, I'm resting Friday to Sunday evening because I start working again Sunday evening. I'm sure both of you have had to work on the weekends.
Sure.
I mean, but before this period in my life, I used to work every day of the weekend, and that was ridiculous. It was a 7-day thing that Matt was talking about. But now I like, again, I write in the mornings. If I have to work right after work, I carve out an hour. And then from Friday night to Sunday at like 5, I don't let myself touch anything. And by then I'm like itching for the work. Like I'm actually like, okay, here's where I'm being compelled. And now I can go into the week feeling excited about whatever project I choose to work on Monday morning. And that's like the thing, that's my routine. I keep like that, it resets every single week and there's comfort in it. And I like that because it's just, there's so much, you know, it's, you can't force your body to push that far beyond its limit and expect to be productive every single day.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Can I add something to what Bev was saying? Or thinking about like time, you know, and sure your brain space and like what you have capacity for. One of the things I think that's become really important to my writing practice is like making the parts of my life that are irritating or take up a lot of time in some way, like a certain size. Like I don't like email that's about like logistics. Like, hey, could I meet with you to talk about like my thesis or something? I love talking about my students' theses. I hate emailing about when we're both free. And stupid things like I made a spreadsheet that I send to all my students that's just like, here are my office hour slots, my thesis hour slots. They sign up themselves, so I don't have to email about it. And there's so many a week, and it means my like thesis work is exactly the same size every week, right? There's 5 slots. They all send me 25, 30 pages. I know I'm going to read 150 pages of thesis work every week. And then those things stay the same size instead of like, one week I get 3 novels and one week I don't get anything. And I think there's something to like controlling the other parts of my life so they stay the correct duration and size that allows my brain to work on my books. That seems really important to me. It took me a long time to figure that out, that it wasn't like trying to get out of other kinds of work. It was just like making them the right shape to sort of suit me. And it tends to work really well. It always ends up being in service of the people you're working for, but it's just like trying to keep things from being like 24/7, you know, even like correspondence and stuff. Like try really to keep like email to like business hours for other people and for me, because it just like takes up so much brain space when you're getting like constant things on your phone or something, right? So I think that seems really important too.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great reminder. And so moving on to the next question, I do want to touch on a little bit the more like tangible or practical tools that you use in your writing practice. The title of this panel is The Writer's Toolbox. And so I think there are a lot of tools out there like Scrivener, or even just like Word doc could be considered a tool. And so I'm wondering, what writing tools or software do you use? And if you would recommend any to any other writers. And so Katie, I can come back to you.
Sure. I use Scrivener for drafting, and I started using it. I think I started using it when I started writing this book, so in 2017. And I love it because it gives you sort of this bird's eye view of the project. So you have kind of a menu on your left that, you know, you can see all of your chapters, you can see all of, you can easily click through to all of your research, you can click through to, you know, I do really in-depth character work before I start writing. And so I can click through and look at, you know, every bit of character work that I've done. Anything that I sort of cut or I do a new version of, I can just move it down, but it's still there. And so if I realize halfway through a new draft that I really like something from, you know, however many versions ago, I can go right back, find it really easily and put it back. And so, yeah, that's been really helpful to me. I also use through Scrivener, they have sort of like a corkboard feature. So it's kind of, if you imagine virtual index cards that you might organize on your wall or your desk. And so it has that feature on Scrivener as well. And so, you know, at the beginning of a new novel project, after the character development work that I do, I usually end up with some scenes that emerge from that development. And so if there are any scenes that to me seem like they belong in the novel somehow, whether as backstory, memory, or part of sort of the forward action of the novel, I'll jot them down in 1 or 2 sentences on some of these virtual index cards, and I'll just organize them chronologically. And that becomes sort of my loose outline, if you will. And so when I continue the project, if I kind of lose track of where I am, where I've been or where I'm going, I can kind of click back, look through those cards, figure out where I am. I can move those cards around really easily. And again, have that bird's eye view of, well, how would it look like if, you know, all of this section was actually up here instead of down here? How would that change the momentum of the story or whatever? So to me, that has been like the biggest change in like the sort of practical applications of my writing process. For editing though, so usually when I've got like a full first draft, then I'll export it all into Word. And then once I start editing, I actually start editing it back in Word. And there have been times where if I'm doing really huge structural changes, I'll move it back into Scrivener. And so I haven't figured out how to make that process like more seamless. It can be still like really clunky, the moving it back and forth. But once it gets to kind of a certain point in the editing process, then I stick to Word. But for the drafting part, I would say that Scrivener has to me made really all the difference in the world. Like I would not go back to Word now at this point. Yeah, that's the only, like, I think tool, like special tool, I guess, that I use for writing.
Thank you. Bev, I see you nodding again. And I would also just like to tack on what tools that you use specifically for screenwriting, because you're writing fiction and also screenwriting. So are those like different tools, different applications or softwares? How do you kind of do all of that?
Yeah. Well, one, just as a heads up, I am a nodder. I think it's, again, the therapist in me is like, like, like really giving into the support, but also I'm like, I feel you. That's such I don't know. I feel like everyone on this panel has had such like human responses to these questions, and I appreciate it. So I'm just like, yeah. Well, embrace the nod, everyone. But also, yeah, for me, I've tried Scrivener specifically for this short story collection. It's been incredible, but I also haven't quite mastered it. I think it just feels like a slightly different process for a collection than it feels like for a novel, just because I'm having to reset some settings, like where I'm like, oh, okay, this is like I don't know, there's just specific settings you have to set, and then so that you don't have to reset them every single time. But I always mess up the initial like the initial part of it somehow. So I've gone back to Word. I love Word. But specifically, like, I mean, the biggest thing for me, both screenwriting wise and with my prose, is the whiteboard behind me. And if not a whiteboard, I don't know. I'm a huge believer in like lines. I don't know. I don't know how to describe this. So I have so many journals for so many different things, but I love taking out like a massive piece of blank paper and drawing all sorts of nonsensical lines that only make sense to me, right? But then even at some point, they don't make sense to me, where it's like, once I've, what Katie was talking about in terms of like, once I know the characters, this is when that comes into place, because I'm definitely a character outward person, and less of a plot inward person. So I feel like for me, plot is derived from character. And I think that there are people definitely in the screenwriting world who work in the opposite way, because they work in, very stereotypical genre spaces, even though I hate that term. So they have to worry about plot, and they have to worry about, the world very intensely. And I'm like, I should be doing that because I write grounded sci-fi and horror, but it's fine. Character first. So I usually do like whiteboard. I'm a huge outliner. So again, before I even touch any kind of software, it's usually just me and the blank page. Usually things are handwritten. Note cards are okay for me because usually I have an A, B, and a C story specifically for screenwriting and for writing television. It's super helpful. Like your A story is, the protagonist, right? The central character. And so that's a different color from my B story, which is the supporting character that most serves the main character. And then you have the C story, which is more of like a runner. And that's kind of like the person who gets the comedic beat, the, less serious tone, because to make TV watchable, you have somebody who's a little bit lighter. We don't want to be crying every single day. Even though I do. So I think for me, it's just, like having those different storylines developed in their own specific space is super helpful for me. So the note cards, the only reason I use them is to separate those storylines before I then do a story blend, which is essentially putting the A, B, and C story together to make it feel like one synchronized story. And that's when the real work comes in. You're like, why is this person going on a journey to like outer space, but then their best friend is somehow on Earth, and like, why are we in two different spaces? Like, there's so many things to work out. But it's fun. It's like a huge puzzle piece, and I love that. And then for actual software, I'm a huge Final Draft person, but I think for people who are starting out in any kind of like script writing, do the free platforms first, or the free softwares first. Definitely do. Writer's Duet is a very popular one that people do. I think that's honestly the best one, because you can collaborate with other writers. If you want to show it to a friend or like a peer, you can have them come in as a collaborator and make notes on your like the raw draft, which is super helpful. So I think Writer Duet, but if you want to go ahead and use like an industry standard, Final Draft is the way to go. I think they've fixed some of their glitches. And like now it's really functional and I love it. But I don't know, in terms of like Final Draft and, Scrivener, I think the one thing that unites those two different softwares is that it helps to feel like you have a tangible product, like you have a tangible like book or a tangible script. And that's the whole point of those softwares, is like, you want to keep going because you're like, hey, this looks kind of official. This looks good, and that can really suck in the brainstorming phase, which is why I don't do that. But once I get to the actual like outlining and writing, it helps me in terms of moving forward if I have, these different software programs that help it make it look like a real thing, like something that I'm going to send out into the world. So again, I can't recommend Final Draft enough. You'll hear people talk about Fade In and some other things, or Movie Magic. Sorry, not Movie Magic, it's something else. But Fade In is another popular one. But I really do think that Final Draft is the best, and most industry professionals are using it. So
awesome. Thank you. I mean, that reminds me what you're saying about making it look official, a lot about what you talk about, Matt, and refuse to be done. So what tools do you use and all that? And if you want to touch on that as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was doing my own active listener nod when Bev was talking about that. I think I mean I feel the same way. Like I mostly write in Word. I did write Refuse to Be Done's first draft in Scrivener. It's the only thing I've ever successfully written there. It did work really well for that kind of book for me. And then I moved it into Word and edited it from there, as Katie was talking about. It does not seem like the best place to edit for me. But I've not been able to use it for fiction. It just, for whatever reason, doesn't work. But I think that's partly because I've been writing in Word so long that Word is like invisible to me. It just, you know what I mean? Like my muscle memory is in Word. Like I don't have to think about how to do anything. And I think where I've never got that comfortable with Scrivener. Late in a draft, I work like really long hours. Those like gray bars on the side and like print layout in Word. Like I'll walk around my house and I can see those gray bars like everywhere. Like I think like I get like monitor burning in my brain. Like I spend a lot of time in Word. So that's not very exciting, but I do tend to try to make it look a little bookish while I'm writing, which I think is what Sam's referring to. One thing that's really powerful in Word that's worth learning how to use is styles. If you learn how to use the styles, you can set up like I have a style for like chapter headings, right? And then that will make a table of contents so you can navigate it. And I don't leave a table of contents in a novel, but I can use it to jump around my document while I'm writing, like Katie's doing in Scrivener. So things like that are a part of how you can make it look bookish easily and kind of keep it updating. So that's been really helpful. Beyond that, some of the things I use the Kindle app a lot on my iPad. Even if you're not a Kindle person and you don't want to use Amazon stuff, the Kindle app is free and you can email Word documents to it. And so I review my documents on the iPad or in the Kindle app a lot. And the styles you make in Word will translate into formatting in the Kindle app. So like all those chapter headings you can click through your book that way, even in the ebook version of it, which is pretty cool. So I do I often review my book before I go to bed and sort of look at what I've been working on to try to find somewhere to start the next day. And I'll use the Kindle app to do that because I can't edit, right? Like, so I can't tinker before I go to bed, but I can look. One of the other things is like that confidence thing Beth was talking about. The Kindle app makes everything look the same. So when you flip from like a really good finished book you're reading to your kind of like shitty half-written book, they look exactly the same. And every once in a while I open that app and I'm like, what's this book? This seems great. And I'm like, oh, that's mine. So it's kind of a neat trick that I think is worth having. The other thing I've done some of in the past with my second novel, I was living in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I always had to drive these like 6-8 hour drives places downstate to do things. And I used the Max text to speech thing to make like an audiobook of my novel in progress. And I would, this is so miserable. Maybe don't do this, but I listened to like 6 hours of like the robot reading my novel back to me, which is merciless. It gives you nowhere to hide. It's not a good performance, right? I was driving, so I couldn't edit. I couldn't take notes. I could just listen and think. And I actually found that really useful. I had a really hard time wrangling that book's sort of plot, and I think that helped me a lot. The other tool, I think I have 2 monitors at home, and that's been a part of my process for a long time. And when I rewrite, I retype. Especially in like between the first and second draft, I retype my book entirely, usually in a second draft. Sort of believing that retyping is better than revision most of the time. And so I'll leave like the old draft on this monitor and I'll type into the main monitor. And you obviously could do that with a printout or a tablet or something, but I think being able to have stuff on both screens has been a thing for a long time. I think I don't use computer right. I always have one window open. I can't have like 5 windows on a screen. Like I feel like I don't know, there's something odd about that. So I have to have 2 screens to open up 2 windows. But I think like that's been sort of it. I edit by hand a lot, but I don't write by hand very often because my handwriting is terrible. I also say like maybe like buy a printer. It's amazing how many writers don't own printers anymore. It's good to be able to print things off once in a while. Like you can get a really good like Brother black and white printer for $80. Go buy one of those. They last forever. Weird. I don't know why no one has one anymore.
I need to get one.
Yeah, see?
I know. And I'm always
You're
like,
making something meant to be on paper. Look at it on paper occasionally.
Well, that I was going to say
I
something about like the terrible handwriting. So just so you know, even though I write a ton of random stuff when my handwriting is horrible, but honestly, it's so helpful because I mean, I think I was talking, who was I talking to? I can't think of her name right now. Maybe it was Kelly Link. I don't know. Another author. And we were talking about writing and how like something about your brain having to transfer the horrible writing to your computer, you come up with something better than what we even put it down. And it's just so like, it's such a way to not be precious about our work too. Like if you're writing something short, I mean, I would never write my whole novel down. I think I tried that once when I did a manuscript I'm never going back to, but yeah, I don't know. I love like the writing and seeing how messy it is and embracing like the mess of like, the work and then kind of transferring it and seeing like, oh wow, like that came from me. That was that's actually more profound than I thought it was when I wrote it down.
Yeah, and I think that is a kind of rewriting, right? I mean, it is the same thing I'm getting by retyping, you're getting by handwriting and then typing. I sort of, after giving all these like craft lectures about Refuse to Be Done and this thing about retyping, I realized that maybe I had invented the typewriter, that like every time you want to make a new version, you have to retype it.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, am I just like a elder millennial inventing the typewriter with this like laborious, like I wrote a whole book about how typewriters work, but I didn't know I was doing that. Yeah, it's not great.
Oh no, I mean, but it's beautiful. I start over on a blank page, even if I'm not rewriting a scene.
Yeah.
Because it just feels better. You're like, okay, this is different, not married to this other draft. There were so many problems. I'm okay with going back and like, if at least if I'm rereading, like it, move it. And then I keep it or I don't keep it.
I do the same thing, not to be like, just Scrivener, but yeah, I do that as well on Scrivener, where you can look at two windows on there. And so when I am revising, I love also starting with the blank page, but just having that reference point, so being able to sort of read through, see what is working, right, from any perspective, like an emotional perspective, a character perspective, a line perspective, and being able to kind of keep or grow those moments, but then have like that freedom of the blank page in front of you to where you can sort of like reinvent or take it in a different direction. There is definitely something to the blank page when I think you're revising. That to me is very freeing. You're not stuck or tied to what you've done before.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. It is already 8:02 p.m. So I'm going to move us into the Q&A session. Cool. So for our audience, if you have any questions for our panelists, please add them to the Q&A box and we will get to as many as we can. So first up, Maya is asking, how do you work in meaningful writing time with the extreme demands of marketing and promotion, especially with an upcoming release? Do you all give yourselves grace to focus on just the promotional efforts? And anyone can feel free to jump in on these.
I just focused on the promotion. I found that I found it was impossible for me to be in both brain spaces at the same time, so the brain space of promoting, which included, doing interviews and podcasts, but then also working on a lot of nonfiction that I was really excited to work on. To me, writing, the shorter nonfiction, kind of like the essays, exercises like a different creative part of my brain, and they complement each other well. But I find it hard to do both on like the same day or even the same week. It's sort of like I have to commit to one or the other at any given time. And then the book promotion kind of took it to the next level, where it was a lot of, also like Zoom things and, things that I had to do in person. And they kind of took whatever spare time that I had or could create. And I found that it was just so much for me that I couldn't switch over into that creative phase of new drafting. And also like when I don't think I fully anticipated, when the book came out, it was like, people were reading it and people were commenting about it and people were reviewing it. And there were just for a while, like 6 months, I'd say really like all of last year, so many voices in my head that felt really stifling when I sat down to try to draft something brand new. And so it kind of reached a point where I was like, okay, it's just not going to happen right now. I just have to kind of accept that it's not going to happen, give myself some space, do my best in these other capacities, and then come back to it after I've had some space away, And so And I think, like Bev was talking about, like itching to get back to it. And that's how I'm feeling right now. Like I'm itching. I don't feel like I've got a ton of voices in my head. I feel like I can tap into my own voice again and tap into the story again. And I think sometimes, at least for me, like that was what I needed, to give myself the space to fully commit to the promotion, fully commit to the essays that went along with it. And then eventually kind of let myself slide back into that space. And I know a lot of authors don't have that, that privilege. Like if they're on a much more set deadline than mine has turned out to be, like, then they just kind of have to do it. Right. But yeah, I think that if you are on a one book deal, or if your deadline is, not set in stone or far in the future or whatever, like I think that there, for me, was a lot to be said in terms of like lowering your expectations for creative output and just kind of focusing on one thing.
Yeah. I think all that sounds right to me too. I've had kind of a, I started the novel I'm writing now in 2019 while my novel Appleseed was on submission to editors, which felt really healthy at the time. I was look at me, my book's on submission and I'm writing, which felt really good. And then we sold that book and we sold Refuse to Be Done like in 2020. So these two books going through the editing process while I was writing another novel, and then eventually kind of promoting those books. And so it's been kind of like a crazy, I mean, I guess it's now like 3 years, right? It's been like a long time. I've been writing this book. And I've written a couple of drafts, like I'm writing like a third draft right now, but there were times where I couldn't do very much. I mean, there's just no way. And you had to find ways to switch between projects and between modes. But it's kind of that thing where like, I just feel more like myself on a day I'm writing. So I think that was helpful. So I didn't always make a ton of progress, but I did some. I did 70 events between Appleseed and Refuse to Be Done in like a year. And when I got kind of toward the end of those this last summer, I could feel my brain like opening up. I just had more space, and I was like, oh, I'm starting to get the, like, I'm not promoting a book brain back, because I had been on that treadmill for a little while. I will say, I think for me, I mean, if you have limited time, time is just limited, but sometimes when you're in book release mode, you're really aware of like what everybody else is publishing, everything that's coming out around you, how their books are doing. You're just like, and that can make, like, I think comparison is like the root of writer's block in a lot of ways. And one of the things that's generally helped me write while I have a book coming out is not reading a lot of new books and like getting into like when Appleseed came out, I just read like 1970s science fiction for like 6 months. And it was like, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't competing with those books. It was fine. I wrote a science fiction novel. Those are science fiction novels, but they're not, no one's like House Frederick Pohl's sales numbers compared to Matt Bell's or something, right? So I think that helped me write, was to like get out of the machine at large, and that's happening on like social media and other places, even if I was participating for my own self at that time.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, next question. How do you stay accountable with editing your work? I feel like it's easier to free write, like it's more fun to write new ideas, but it's a struggle to then go back and turn it into better writing. You're all nodding now.
I would rather rewrite than draft. So like, that's easy for me. Like, right. Like the drafting is like, sometimes, yeah, I like working the material after it's made. Like the second draft is like the best draft for me. So, so I don't have a ton of answer to that, except to say, like, the more you learn to like love what you get out of revision or rewriting, the easier it is to commit to doing it, I think.
Yeah, like I used to work as an editor and I really love that part of it as well. I think it's again kind of a different part of the creative brain. It's more analytical, it's more puzzle solving, but it also, like, to me, so much of the first draft just really feels like a struggle, and you're facing all the blank pages in the world, and I think, to me, once you've got a draft, like, you've made it to the summit, at that point, then you can, where would I take the metaphor from here? You can climb to a bigger summit, yeah, I love the revision process. I think, it'll be interesting this time around, because for More Than You'll Ever Know, it was actually the second book that I was working on with my agent. And so my agent, we began to work together in 2017 for a different book that went on submission in August of that year and ultimately didn't sell. And so at that point, I had the idea for More Than You'll Ever Know. My agent loved it. I was excited about it. And so I started working on it. And so when I reached that first draft period, I edited think I did 1 or 2 big edits by myself. I was not about to send her 600 pages. Not that I ended up with a small book, but after that, we actually edited it for 18 months together, and it was a really deeply collaborative process. In that, I did not at all expect it to take so long. I thought, we'd go through a round or 2, and it just turned out to be, like she was just an amazing creative partner. She read probably 12 or 15 drafts of the book, and she always had amazing notes that sometimes I couldn't handle at the time. I still remember and laugh at one particular email. I think it was halfway through this 18-month process, maybe, yeah, probably. And I felt really good about the draft, the revision that I'd sent her. I thought, surely we'd be going on submission finally now. And so she sent me, a slightly smaller email, right, but still pretty lengthy. And I wrote her back, and I was like, look, I'm just angry. I'm just feeling really angry at you. So I'm just going to take a breath and, read your notes again tomorrow, and we'll go from there. And she was just kind of like, okay, get back to me, when you're ready. But I think that in that revision process, it was like every major revision that we did, we would solve, or I would solve a big problem. Let's say the first revision was on structure, right? And that was, let's say, a 2 or 3 month revision process. And so structure, great, figure that out, at least up until that point in time. But once that was fixed, it kind of revealed all of these other issues that were sort of hidden by the fact that structure was was not working to the extent that it was not working, right? And so every layer of revision we did kind of revealed these newer and more easily fixable, but still complex issues. And I think that is what, that's what I, as an editor, that's kind of what I was used to working with other people's work, right? Starting with kind of this major structural revision, then honing in on something, like character, and then you get, smaller and smaller and smaller until finally you're at the line edit level. And so it ended up being, it was, and then of course, once the book sold, then it was kind of starting all over again with my editors, right, for another year. And I really love that process of working with smart people who get the work, who get the vision, and who are committed to kind of helping you reach your vision for the book. And I think I've been really lucky in that regard because, the team that I've worked, I love my editors, I love my agent. So it'll be interesting this time around, though, because I think this is the first time where, I'll be sending a first draft to my editor and kind of starting from there, I guess, or I'll be sending it to my agent and working on it a little with her before. Like, Matt, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, or else I'll just edit it by myself for a long time before I send it to anybody. So I think this, it'll be an interesting revision process. But I think for me, once I get the draft, there's no stopping from there. That's when I know, okay, it's going to get there. It's just a matter of time and structuring the revision, right? And figuring out, okay, well, what is the big thing you're going to start with? What issues are revealed after you solve that big thing? I also did a lot of reverse engineering once at a certain point in the revision, I read, Save the Cat for the first time, right? And I didn't use a lot of it, but some of it was helpful in terms of figuring out, why does this section feel slow? Oh, it's because, this thing that happens should be moved earlier, right? And which is not to say that the beats all happen in the book where they're prescribed, right? Because it's just, it's not formulaic in that way. But I think being able to kind of look at all these different issues in your book at different parts of the revision process, to me, is helpful and also exciting. So I think if you can look at revision as something exciting and something invigorating, then that's really important. I think if you look at it as a slog and something you hate and you don't want to do, and you just want to move straight through it, then it's gonna feel like real work. Yeah.
Really quickly to add what Katie was just saying, I was listening to the screenwriting podcast a little while ago, and one of the women on it was saying, when I'm not good at something, I've started doing this thing where I say I love doing that.
You listening to the Screenwriting Live?
Yeah. So one of the women on that
podcast.
It's
Everyone
so good.
Listen to that podcast. Megalopho, Lorian McKenna, love them. Sorry, go ahead.
It's so good. No, it's great. I'm not sure which one was talking about it, but she was talking about not feeling like she was good at pitches, right? And so then she said, "I love pitching," and then every time you have to do it, you're like, "This is the thing I love." Or someone talks about how they pitch, and you go well, that's great. That I'm going to incorporate that into mine because I also love it. So I'm eager for that. So like, if you don't like revision, maybe tell yourself, I love revising. I love rewriting, and just see if it like changes like where you stand in those moments. Like, you're right. Like the thing that used to be a chore becomes something that you're like soaking things up about, because now that's like one of your areas of expertise.
Mhm.
You
Well,
tell ourselves a story, right? It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, everyone should just stop now and go follow the podcast. It's so good. Because it's not just about like, they're not giving you how-tos, right? All the time.
Right,
It's
no.
like they're literally just talking about the life. But also, Sam, can you repeat the question? I want to make sure I'm responding correctly. I have thoughts, and then I got so lost in what you guys were saying. What are we supposed to?
Yes. One. Oh yes. How do you stay accountable with editing your work? Because it is more fun to write new ideas and stuff like that. So how do you like deal with that kind of struggle?
Ooh, I have so many thoughts. Well, one, someone, I don't know if you guys know her, Maya Perez. She had talked about her process through going through an MFA, and how when she started her MFA, she couldn't finish anything. And then how when she got through it, she was like, I became so obsessed with finishing. And that was the biggest mind shift ever, right? Where it's like, you almost have to be so obsessed with finishing that like the creating new is exciting, but then nothing is ever done, So I think that's one thing to think about. But for me, I always talk about this book, Screenwriting is Rewriting. It's Jack Epps' novel. I love it because it applies to any kind of writing. And essentially it turns the writing process into like the equivalent of like upkeeping a house or a car. This is how I think about it. He doesn't say this metaphor, but like for me, I think about it in terms of upkeeping a house or a car, because like the same thing with a car, right? You could have a structural problem or a cosmetic issue. The structural problem is essentially what Katie is talking about, right? Like structure, plot, and character are like the biggest pillars of your story. Everything is like festering from those core things. And then once you attack that, then you can think about style, or voice or whatever, and making sure there's a consistent voice, or, oh, we're talking about pacing, right? You can't worry about pacing if you don't have a solid structure, or you don't know what your plot is, or you don't know who your characters are. So I like to think about it in smaller chunks. I'm definitely like I'm going to revise one or two things at a time so that I don't overwhelm myself. And then I end up going through like a plot and character revision, a structure revision. And then I go in and I do my like style and this. And it does make like the editing process that much easier. But I really do think like the point at which you should share with people is a point at which you feel like I have no idea what else to do with this work. If you feel like, oh yeah, right. I feel like if you have another revision in you, do the revision. Why are you sharing? Like, don't do it. Don't taint your like love for it or your vision for it yet. You don't want to hate the person for no reason, right? Like you can't hate your editor for no reason. But it's the truth, right? Let's say you have an accountability partner or someone that you trust with your first drafts. I always have one or two people that I send my work to. Let's say I'm thinking about an idea. I'm not sure if it's correct, or like I have an outline for something. I think it needs work. I send it to one person or two people who know that this is a work in progress, and that I'm coming to you because I really need help. And I think that that's important in terms of like honoring the other person's time and honoring your time. So if you still got to write a rewrite in you, you should probably just do another revision. And then by sending that over, you're going to have so many ideas fester, even though you're pissed, you're like, I hate you so much. We're not friends anymore. 1 week later, you're like, wow, you're the best human being ever. This is so it's just like the whole, where are we? What side are we? But I would talk about that with revision because it's so helpful. Like if you really feel like I don't know where to go, give it to somebody.
That's great advice.
Thank you all so much.
Absolutely.
All right, next question. I'm writing my first novel draft. All that lies ahead can be overwhelming. Writing query, finding beta readers, finding an agent. Any advice? It sounds like so many years ahead.
Yes. I mean, it is probably, right? Like it is a lot of stuff. But I think maybe kind of like what Bev was just saying too, the real trick is that you don't have to do everything at once, right? And you don't have to have it all before you start. knowing what you want to be doing when and why you're doing it seems really important. You know, so many people are like asking questions about like query letters when they have like 3 chapters of their first novel, and it's like, you just worry about that later, you know. It's awful, so don't worry about it the whole time you're writing. Writing's supposed to be fun. You know, so I think some of it's just doing those things as you can. You know, beta readers are probably the tricky part. It's always hard to find your people. You know, I think I might be closer to what Bev was saying. I show people almost nothing, like kind of at all. You know, the process that's in Refuse to Be Done is like everything I do before anyone sees any of it, right? Like I go through like my whole thing. So I get feedback kind of late. But I mean, you know, you have other things, but I think some of it is just like you add the pieces you can. You know, I found the people I want to talk to about books and about my books by like meeting other writers and going to workshops, and, you know, certainly my MFA and in other ways I, you know, interact with people. Katie talked about writing this article and interviewing people about like other mothers who are writing, being part of how she has her group that she has now. Like there's all these ways that we find our people. Yeah, right. And I feel like a lot of the friends I have as writers were people that I reached out to for other things or met through journals we were publishing in, or events like this. And, you know, you can find your people over time, and you also find what you need, which is not all the things you hear you need. You know, like we all have sort of different needs as writers. Maybe Bev was talking earlier about like emailing words, like just pages to someone every week, or just being like, here's what I did, don't read it. I think that's like that level of like writing group is enough for a lot of people. Like I don't actually want to talk about pages when I'm writing. I do want someone to know I'm writing. Maybe that's what we were talking about this whole time. It's like, I just want a little like credit that keep me going. But everything else you can sort of do in order. Like it's okay. Like you can't really query agents till you've written the whole book. So learn about it, but don't worry about it. You know, I think you can wait till it's time.
Nice.
Yeah. And I would also add, and it probably sounds like one of those things that's like, oh, well, you know, easy for you to say now that your book is published, but it just like the writing is the best part, you know. I mean, I think that if you are able to sell your book and make any kind of living from it, then obviously that's important. And that's, you know, I'm able to make writing my full-time job. And that was kind of essential for me at this point in my life. But I can say that when it comes to just the level of satisfaction and enjoyment and fulfillment, it's just the writing, you know. And so I think that it can feel overwhelming because there's so much ahead. I'm overwhelmed just thinking about what's ahead for this new project because I'm just so early in these beginning phases. I'm having to remind myself, like, no, this is the good stuff, right? Like, don't wish yourself to the end of it, because the work is the good stuff. The rest of it, like Matt said, you'll get there when you get there. You'll get there when you're ready. I think, like Matt said, also, like the one thing you can kind of do right now is make these friendships, make these connections, and that's going to enrich your writing process and your writing experience. But as for kind of the rest of it, I would say as much as possible, just focus on the work itself, because that's what will get you there, is the work.
Yeah. And I guess just to add on to that, it's, how do I describe this? I feel like, definitely as a screenwriter, they're night and day. So if there's anyone else on this, you know, panel, anyone else here, right, in the audience who feels like, oh, screenwriting and fiction is like the path that I want to go on, I think it's an amazing path, because you have 2 different disciplines to kind of escape into when you hate the other one. But at the same time, it's so much work, right? The industry, the like keeping up with networking horizontally and vertically. It's like, it's so much reaching out to people, staying on, like keeping spreadsheets, right? I have a spreadsheet that's of 100 rejections, right? So every year I start, and the goal is to reach 100 rejections. And the reason I have that goal is that, you know, I want to remind myself that I'm putting myself out there, and the rejection can be so small, right? Let's say that you send it to a friend and they hate your work. That's a rejection. Like, great. You know, like take it, do it, just Love do it. And I feel like there's so many ways that like you can put yourself out there as a writer and start taking ownership and advocating for yourself that I'm like, you can start there early. I wouldn't say, oh, go query your book. Again, as Matt said, if you're only 3 chapters in, don't do that. It's way too early. But I do think that there's something to like trusting yourself and building confidence as a writer, which I think was another Writers League of Texas course, right? Or something. That sounds familiar. But biggest advice is, one, don't fight it. Like, if whether it's an idea or how you're feeling mentally, physically, and emotionally, don't fight it. And I know, again, I've talked about being a therapist, but I really do think it's helped my writing, because I feel like if you're feeling like any tension, or you're feeling like there's something you're forcing, right? There's a difference between like dedicating yourself to something and being diligent, and then forcing your body to push past its limits. You're not going to be creative if you're like running yourself ragged. That's probably a sign that you need to find like time to live, right? Like that's what we were talking about, time to live, so that you can be excited about writing about the things you've lived or things that other people have lived. So I think, again, don't fight it, whether it's you feel like, oh, I should be writing historical fiction, but I consume rom-coms, right? Rom-coms. You love rom-coms. You know, like, listen to your consumption habits. Listen to the things that bring you joy. Like Katie was saying, there's so many things like that are just nonsense and menial tasks that you have to do once you've reached a certain point of writing, that like the writing really is the only thing that's like you. And as a screenwriter, sometimes that's not even that, right? Because then the director has something, the producer has something, you're like, whoever, like in post, the editor's like, actually, Bev, you're wrong. But at the same time, it's like the writing is the thing that you escape into. You're here for the writing. You're not here for like every single accolade. You're not here to, you know, like make sure that everyone on the planet loves your work and like killing yourself in the process of doing that. The thing that you're there for is the writing. So again, I keep saying don't fight it, because I feel like I have to remind my friends and like people who ask me for advice or take my class, like, what should I write? And I'm like, I don't know. What should you write? You know, like, what should I focus on? Do you have time to do every single day, or should you have a different set of goals? Do you have something tangible? As long as you're consistent and showing up for your work, something is going to come from it. And so like having faith in yourself and having faith in the writing and your ability to do it is like my greatest bit of advice. So.
Awesome. Well, on that note, thank you all so much for joining us to kick off this year of programming. This is it for this panel discussion in our Q&A, but definitely buy these panelist books. Check out Bev's class. I could listen to the 3 of you talk about writing all night. But that is it for tonight. So thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you to Book People. And thank you again to you, Matt, Bev, and Katie. It has been so wonderful.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone.
Well,
Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.